Good morning. Glad to see each of you here today. We'll be continuing our study of the parables. I'm reading from the New King James, and we're thankful for your presence. Our verses for today, if you'd like to be turning to them, will be in chapter 25 of Matthew. Matthew 25, starting in verse 14. Before we get into the study, I'd like to make mention of some news here at Happy Haven. As most of you know, I'm the administrator at Happy Haven, and we have a couple of job openings that you are free to share with others, or maybe it'd be something you'd be interested in. One is to provide us with relief as a house mom on a weekend. And you could do this every weekend, or you could do it one weekend a month. But we need respite house moms. And if you would have an interest in that, I'll tell you more about it. Just call me at Happy Haven. The other matter is we need a new caseworker. Our caseworker decided to retire, and so we have a need. The caseworker must have a bachelor's degree in sociology, psychology, counseling, guidance, some related matter. So if you or someone you know would have an interest in that position, it is an immediate need. The opening is there as of the end of this past week. So help us out if you can. We'd love for you to give me a call. I can tell you more about it in person. As I said, I want to look at chapter 25 of Matthew, and just to make mention of the fact, chapter 25 has several sections that are on neglect. The wise and foolish virgins are talked about in verses 1 through 13. What happened? Well, we'll delve into that in more detail when we do that parable. But what I need you to understand just simply is the foolish virgins didn't have extra oil, and they ran out of oil, and they asked the wise virgins, give us of your oil. Neglect. They neglected to have a sufficient supply. And then we have the sheep and the goats, verses 31 through 46. And you well remember the goats are on the left, and the sheep are on the right. Well, except here in the auditorium. We're good. All of us sheep. But right in the middle of these neglect teachings is another neglect teaching. I'm going to give you talents. And he distributed talents. And the 1 talent man, of the 3 that were given the talents, the 1 talent man, we all recall, was condemned. So let's read this, starting in verse 14. For the kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far country, who called his own servants and delivered his goods to them. And to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his own ability, and immediately he went on a journey. Then he who had received the 5 talents went and traded with them and made another 5 talents. And likewise he who had received 2 gained 2 more also. But he who had received 1 went and dug in the ground and hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of those servants came and settled accounts with them. So he who had received 5 talents came and brought 5 other talents, saying, Lord, you delivered to me 5 talents. Look, I have gained 5 more talents besides them. His Lord said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. And he who had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, you delivered to me 2 talents. Look, I have gained 2 more talents besides them. The Lord said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. Then he who had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. I was afraid and went and hid your talent in the ground. Look, there you have what is yours. But his Lord answered and said to him, You wicked and lazy servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown and gathered where I have not scattered seeds. So you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers, and at my coming I would have had interest back. I would have received back my own with interest. Therefore, take the talent from him, give it to him who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even that which he has will be taken away. And cast the unprofitable servant into the outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. That's one of the longer parables that we've studied. Parables can be a few words, a paragraph, or longer. That one's a little bit longer. I'm reminded as we start this of Pythagorean, who was a Greek philosopher and mathematician, who once asked, Why are you at the Olympic Games? And he said, Some come for prizes, some come to sell merchandise, some come to enjoy themselves, some come to meet friends. I just came to stand on the sidelines and watch. Well, I wonder if sometimes we have some folks in the church that are spectators rather than participants. The distribution of the talents, each man, according to his ability, had been given by the master what he thought he could handle. And 2 of them doubled it, and 1 decided to bury his talent instead. How very sad indeed. Christianity is to bear fruit. John 15, verse 2. And it's a given, really, that John 15, verse 2, Jesus said, Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away, and every branch that bears fruit, he prunes that it may bear more fruit. A lot of these parables have been talking about growing fruit-bearing trees and so on. And pruning is essential. Apparently, there's a certain way to cut off certain portion of the branch, and it will cause the remaining branch to bear more. And Jesus wants us to bear fruit. It's just that simple. And in the parable of the talents that we have before us is quite a bit like the parable of the pounds. And that's not as well known, but that's found in Luke chapter 19, starting in verse 11. So as we consider the parable of the talents today, I'd like to look at the gifts, I'd like to look at their use, and the contribution. The consequences. I knew that didn't sound right. What are the consequences? First one, we're looking at the gifts and their distribution. A talent in Jesus' day, a talent of silver was worth about $1,000 in our day. And with silver prices and gold prices, what they are right now, probably worth a lot more than that. And so one had been given 5 talents. I know as a child, when I first heard this parable, I thought talent was I can play an instrument or I can juggle balls. I have a talent. But that's not what we're talking about. It is a measurement of wealth, and in this case, silver. That was the distribution. Each of these 3 servants received something, and each individual was unique. Just as each of us have a unique fingerprint, each of these servants had a capacity that was theirs alone, and they were unique in what they could manage, what they could handle. God has a work for everyone, and God is willing to give you enough capital to accomplish the work that He would like you to do. That's something that's a lesson here as well. I hear of Christians that will sometimes say with humility, "Oh, I'm just a one-talent Christian." You know, I don't, and there we are talking about skill or ability, and I do believe that we are multi-talented. We are selling ourselves short if we say, "I can only do one thing." Well, if you reflect on your life, I believe your Christian life has already probably shown activity in more than one realm. And we're thankful for that, very much so. But God's going to give you enough capital to accomplish whatever you need to accomplish. And then in the gifts, each did not receive the same gift. They're given in keeping with their ability. And God doesn't expect us to do something that we cannot do. Our native abilities differ. There are those of a strong body and those of poor health. There are those with superior intellect and those with something less. Opportunities to develop the gifts and to use the gifts are also distributed. The field that we studied with the rocky and the stony and the thorny and the good ground, it also gives an indication of what's possible as we grow in the kingdom. You've probably seen the little equation. I love little mathematical equations. Ability plus opportunity equals responsibility. Okay, each of the men that got the talents was given abilities. They were responsible for multiplying them, growing them. And 2 of them did, 1 of them did not. Talents, as I say, reference not just natural abilities as a parallel, but rather everything God has given us would pertain to this particular matter. All his blessings. How are you using them, or are you burying them instead of growing them? So, we've looked at the gifts themselves. Now let us look at the use. How do you dedicate what you have? What is the result of the master putting confidence in you? He's leaving for a trip, and I'm distributing talents for you to develop. Well, it looks like 2 of them went to work immediately, the 5 talent and the 2 talent. And they doubled it. Hard work. The stock market was doing really well back then. And so they managed that extremely well. They could have had the attitude of, I'm just going to sit back and play it safe. And really, it wasn't all that safe for the man to dig a hole and bury it. I know in days gone by, there were treasures that were buried in fields, sometimes in a mason jar. I think I probably told you about the very sad murder years ago of the country star String Bean Ackerman and his wife. And they discovered at their death that they had hidden money in the walls of their house. And they pried the paneling or the sheetrock off of those walls, and the money had rotted, basically worthless. Thousands of dollars that they didn't put in the bank, but they put it in the wall. We hear of people stuffing their mattresses with money, mostly back in the day of the feather bed. But really, is that such a good use? And I don't believe it draws any interest at all. Well, these 2 went to work, invested the 5 and the 2, and doubled it. They didn't necessarily play it safe. They had the attitude, I need to develop this. The one failed to grow his 1 talent, and there was disappointment on the part of his master. And also, I'm concerned when I read the attitude that he has to his master, saying, you're one that reaps where you haven't sowed. And I just think that seems like blame shifting. Do you ever know of anybody that instead of saying I'm accountable, they want to shift the blame, take attention off of themselves? Well, this man apparently didn't have faith in himself either. He didn't do as much as the others who had more than he did, that they would have been risking, as it were, in trying to grow it. We don't need to compare ourselves with another person who may have more talents than we do. God expects you to use what you have. And that's so important. Very vitally important. I had a math teacher when I was in the 8th grade. He was also the principal of my elementary school. His name was Gordon Sanders. And he, every year, would read to us the parable of the talents. And I can still see him saying, and he went and digged in the earth and buried it. You know, he was very dramatic with that. And I was thankful that he believed the Bible to whatever extent he had followed it, and that this was kind of a mathematical parable. 5 plus 5 is 10, and 2 plus 2 is 4, and 1 plus no effort is you're going to lose the 1. But he always, when he would tell this parable, would say a quotation from John Greenleaf Whittier, a very obscure little poem named Maud Muller. And I imagine you all haven't read Maud Muller in a while. But here is the line, and then you'll say, oh, I've heard that quote, didn't know it was from that. For of all sad words of tongue or pen, the saddest are these, it might have been. Mr. Sanders always read that to us. What might have been. You'll find that the Maud Muller poem is about a couple who were dating and then they parted company and each married another. But there were the thoughts of what might have been had they stayed together. I bet you're going to Google that when you get home. Maud Muller, M-U-L-L-E-R. Or if you just type in the saddest words of tongue or pen, and it'll bring it up. It's amazing what we have at our fingertips. And we don't have to go to an encyclopedia even to locate something now. But he would always do that. I always appreciated him for a number of reasons. He was very common sense in his approach. Well, I'm going to go ahead and tell you one other quick anecdote. Us little folks in elementary school heard from the upperclassmen that Mr. Sanders had a paddle in his office that had eyes on it like a stove, and he plugged it in and heated it up before he used it. And we believed that. And it kept many a child out of the office. Those were the days. Anyway, let me get back on track. So, the one who might have been, but he buried it, he maybe didn't have faith in himself. He's unsure of himself. And so he just did nothing. Maybe he wanted to compare himself to others and, well, they've got so much more. I've just got one, and having my own little pity party. I don't know. But going another step, he didn't have the courage to work. Slothful. Well, there's something I meant to Google. I've often wondered if the word slothful comes from the animal called the sloth. If you've ever seen a video of a sloth, they are slow moving. They just kind of hang from the tree with those long arms. And slothful. God doesn't want slothful Christians. He wants faithful Christians, working Christians, having the courage to work, to labor. You've got to put forth the effort in order to succeed. And that's the point. I was looking up another quote, and I was puzzled to see how many different people it's attributed to, and so they don't know who said it first. I heard someone say the only person that knew when he said it first, was Adam. That nobody else around it before Eve came on the scene anyway. But here is the quote, and maybe you've heard this as well. A performer says, if I miss one day of practice and perform, I know it. I can tell it if I just miss a day. If I miss 2 days practice and perform, my teacher can tell it. If I miss 3 days of practice, my audience can tell it. I found that to just be an interesting quote. We've got to keep on working and not miss practice. If you've ever had physical therapy, you know that it's good to stay with whatever the schedule is. Physical therapy a little different in that you stress the muscles for a day, and then usually it's good to rest those muscles the next day. But we've got to have the courage to not be slothful, to put forth the effort. And did this worker show any faith in his master that had shown faith in him? I'm giving each of you talents. He, by implication, showed he had faith in the workers. But that didn't mean they did what they should. To some people, God is a stern power. He's been unreasonable. He has made demands. Well, God has certain requirements, and He expects us to grow and to function. He gives us the means of accomplishing the task before us. Years ago, I heard Dr. Carol Ellis in a lectureship talking about the 10 Commandments. And he said, if you look at them as thou shalts and thou shalt nots, one thing you might recall is that when God says thou shalt, He's saying help yourself to happiness. And when God says thou shalt not, He's saying don't harm yourself. Don't harm yourself. God has our best interest. God is a loving God. He wants you to help yourself to happiness, and He wants you not to hurt yourself. How much I'd love for that to be instilled in young and old alike, but especially as our young ones are coming up. Sometimes they're repelled by the thou shalt nots, and they say, that's just a bit negative. No, God's just saying, don't hurt yourself. Well, let's look at the consequences now for not using. There is a reckoning time coming. There is a twofold reward. Well done, good and faithful servant. Notice He didn't say perfect. God wants us to be faithful. The direction of our life should be faithfulness to Jesus. But they are given more than they had. They doubled what they had, and they were told, well done, good and faithful servant. Used to be in preaching class with a young man, and we all teased him about his first name. It was well done. We said, you've already got Judgment Day halfway done. The well done is already there if the Lord just calls your name. But well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joys of your Lord. What a blessing the 5-talent man had and the 2-talent. And then the wicked servant, they took the talent he had and gave it to the 10-talent man. He now has 11. What about that? Well, I don't know that there's a whole lot we can do with that. But the punishment was, take away what he has, cast him into punishment, weeping and gnashing of teeth. We all know what weeping is. Gnashing teeth is sometimes, if someone's in excruciating pain, they may grind the teeth. They may act like they're ready to bite anybody. And that is the punishment that's everlasting. Everlasting joy for an eternal soul, or everlasting punishment for an eternal soul. And here's another little quote. If you don't use it, you'll lose it. When have you heard that? Sounds like the 1-talent man was a fulfillment of that. Use it or lose it. We lose what we fail to use. Now, if you have an ability and you use it daily, you're going to grow in that ability. Just like the performer that says, if I miss a day of practice, or 2, or 3, I may notice it, my teacher may notice it, the audience may notice it. And so, practice makes perfect. We've got to keep on increasing in our skills. If we don't do that, we're likely to find a decrease in it. If you have learned a new word today, Maud Muller, for instance, maybe you'll want to use that sometime. And that skill, I know of people who say, I like to learn one new word a day, and the way you can learn that word is to use it in conversation. And that's a good thing to do as well. Well, let's look at a difference between the 2 servants and the 1, the last one. It's not that the 2 were more gifted. The 5-talent man could have buried the 5. The 2-talent man could have buried the 2. It's not that they were more brilliant or they had a knack for business. They were commended because they were faithful. And if you're faithful in little, I'm going to treat you as if you're faithful in much. And if you're unrighteous in little, I'm going to treat you as if you're unrighteous in much. That's found in Luke chapter 16. They were faithful with what they had from the Lord. And they were commended for that. Be thou faithful unto death, and I'll give you the crown of life. Revelation 2 verse 10 tells us. Each man, with the ability he had, did his best. Some may come into the eternal home with more trophies than others. But the Lord's going to run and meet us with the only words that count. Well done, good and faithful servant. Well, I'd like to close with the thought, are you being faithful with what the Lord has blessed you with? Are you running the race set before you? As Hebrews 12, 1 through 2 tells us, that we're to lay aside every weight and every besetting sin and run with patience the race set before us, looking to Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despised the shame, and he sat down at the right hand of God. We're still running the race. We're still supposed to be participants. The spectators are those that have gone on before, those heroes of the faith that have already received their crown. And how wonderful it is that they are cheering us on. They are flooding the windows of heaven, looking to see how well each of us is doing as we run the Christian race. Well, let's have a prayer, and then we'll be dismissed. Heavenly Father, we're grateful for this day. We're thankful so much for the skills, the talents that you've entrusted with us. Help us each to grow in them. Help us to run our race with patience. Help us to do your will. And may we all hear, well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joys of your Lord. Through Jesus we pray. Amen.